Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is an APH Access Academy webinar. Today, we are making fine arts accessible for students with visual impairments. According to the National Core Arts Standards, there are actually 8 disciplines to fine arts. There's dance, media arts, music, music with instruments, music composition theory, music ensembles, music technology, theater, and visual arts. Today, we are focusing our attention on the visual arts. And I am pleased to introduce our primary guest speaker, Kristen Applebee. She comes from the Georgia Academy for the Blind. She's an art teacher who's been in the field inspiring artists for well over 25 years, and specifically sparking creativity for students with visual impairment at the Academy for over 8 years. She's very honored in the profession as she is a 2019 National Outstanding Teacher of Students who are visually impaired or blind by Cosby, and a 2020 Georgia Teacher of the Year Top 10 finalist. Over the past 6 years, her students have received awards at the APH Insights Art Contest, which we'll hear about a little bit more today as well. Also presenting today are APH's very own Tristan Pierce. She is our multiple disabilities and physical education product manager. I always learn a lot from her and the products that she features. Also, we have Rob Gillen, who is with us today. He is in charge of special programs, and he's going to be speaking also towards our tail end of our presentation today. Today, we are going to briefly go over the national art standards. In the category of visual arts, we'll address that. We're going to discuss 5 APH products which offer accessible visual arts instruction, and also what you might be very intrigued to want to listen in on, especially today, is examining barriers and solutions for making fine arts instruction accessible for our students. As we prepare to transition to Kristen speaking, because that's what you're waiting for, we'd like to know, we're going to launch a poll. Have you had the opportunity to help teach a core curriculum art class? Yes, no, or I am an art teacher, so that kind of is a given. So we would love to know if you have had an opportunity to teach. And then Kristen will get set up in the background to share her content with us today. So we would love to know. I'm going to go ahead and end our polling and just share out that we have 6 art teachers with us today. I'm so excited. Thank you for joining us. I hope you'll be especially inspired today. And we have 8 who answered in our poll that say, yes, you have collaborated on that. And 41 who have said, nope, not at this time, but I bet you'll be inspired by the end of today to want to start that collaboration. I'm going to do that. And then if you want to start your share screen.
Okay. It says it's failed to share.
That is okay. We will give it a try again.
I think it's because something else is still up, or you haven't stopped sharing.
Let's see. I am looking. I am actually not sharing anything at this point.
Okay.
If you try one more time, and what I'm going to do, you just bear with us.
Okay. Let me try sharing from here. I think this will work. Is it coming up now?
Beautiful. Yes. We see it.
Okay. Am I up?
You are. Okay. Take it away.
I'm just going to jump right in with the National Visual Art Standards. They all kind of are separated out into 4 categories, which are creating, presenting, responding, and connecting. Of course, if you're going to take an art class, you want to be making art. So the creating takes up normally 80 to 90% of my week with each student. Because of COVID, half of my high school students are virtual, and that has kind of flip-flopped where 20% is now hands-on creating, and a lot more is preparation and things like that. So every state is going to have their own standards, and they all kind of tie back. For example, creating breaks out into my state of Georgia as creative thinking, and then production has its own. So you would do preliminary work, research, thumbnail sketches, maquettes, brainstorming. And then production would include things like the principles and elements of design, working with a wide variety of media and processes and techniques and subject matters and things like that. Contextual understanding goes back to art history and kind of knowing what was going on in the artist's life or in history when something was made. And connections is my favorite because there's nothing that's happening in your student's life or your life or anyone's life that art can't be, that you can't make art about. Every morning, my first period class does CNN 10. We watch the student news every morning and then say, what did they talk about and how can we make art about that? If it's COVID, you could take a black and white photograph of somebody who's dying in a hospital bed or recovering. You can do a giant COVID virus sculpture that fills a whole room. You could have a wall of masks. There's all sorts of things that you can tie back to yourself and to other subject matters. If I had my dream come true, there'd be a bunch of math and science and English teachers outside my door asking how to use art to teach their core content. Every year I have to reinvent the wheel. I might have one student for 5 years in a row and one for 4, and then they skip a year and then come back. So I've never taught the same curriculum twice, but I am teaching all the standards every year. So this year we started with the principle and elements of design, which are line, shape, color, value, texture, form. These are like the nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs that you use to write your epic novel, masterpiece poem. You can't make a masterpiece painting or sculpture without using these elements of art. So we made a chart, or a lot of students chose to make an accordion book where they illustrated each of these elements. For my students who are totally blind, they made an accordion book out of envelopes that had the Braille element on it, and then matching colored Braille card that also says shape or line. And then they used tactile methods. For example, texture, you could put cotton balls or sandpaper. The student used sand and pebbles. Lines could be used with wiki sticks or strings or tape or glue lines. The student used value to create stippling. Where there are a few dots is a light value, where there are many dots is dark value. And then we focused on each one of those elements by itself. So with line, I covered the art movement of op art. And it's kind of strange to talk about op art with people with visual impairments, but it's actually really good for students who have low vision because of the high contrast between the light and the dark, the white and the black. For those who had no vision, they could use wiki sticks to create shapes and then have the lines drawn in different directions. Or I created this lined paper using puffy paint, and they could cut out shapes and change the direction of the lines as they glued it on top of other lined paper. We answered questions such as, how can you use straight lines to create a curve with the string art and map board? Or how can you create something sculpture and 3-dimensional out of something as 2-dimensional and flat as a line? So we would take strips of colored paper and crease it and fold it for zigzag and for curled lines and corkscrews and arches and waves, so that they could kind of make the line come to life and not have it just be a marker line on a piece of paper. Although I did send out charts to my students at home that showed a dotted line, a loopy line, a zigzag line. I like to give my students a piece of yarn or a pipe cleaner at the beginning of class, the younger ones, and say, everybody show me a horizontal line. I just did this last period. Show me a vertical line, show me a diagonal line. Can you make it wiggly? Can you make it, I don't know, we just do it all. And then there's implied lines where it's like a dotted line. When your teacher says everybody get in a line, you're not lying on the floor head to toe, you're standing with space in between you. So I'll give them beads or tiles or beans or pasta or something that they can line up, and they can make arched lines and fill their space, or use yarn on my flannel board to create shapes and pictures. I have a picture here of one student gluing strips of magazine paper to show directional lines, vertical lines. When we moved on to shape, I wanted to use this year the Japanese art form of notan, which is high value contrast because it's so perfect for students with visual impairments. It also is a great way to talk about balance with the yin and yang symbol, which is so perfect. What a perfect example that is. And we can talk about opposites in terms of shapes: large, small, rectilinear, curvilinear, positive, negative. And negative space might not make sense for a lot of my students, especially the ones at home, because they can't walk around with us and feel the space between the chair legs and the shape that my arm leaves when I put my hand on my hip. I have this little hole that I've made. So I sent home little examples of foam that I cut out half a circle and then flipped it on its axis. So I can say, point to the foam, that's the positive shape. Point to the hole, the background, that's the negative shape. And craft foam actually works great for everyone, because when you draw on it, it leaves an indentation and they can feel, and it feels, they can find their line again. If they can't cut out their own shape that they created from starting on one side of their square and going back to that same side, someone else can cut it out for them, and they can assemble all their puzzle pieces together and flip out the shapes and glue them down. So independence is really our goal with all of this. It's our mission goal for my school and my personal goal for my students in my classroom. When doing color, well, this year we talked about the Harlem Renaissance and did analogous watercolors, but I really like to do cardboard relief sculptures. Cardboard is cheap or free, plentiful. They can pick out their pieces and then they choose two primary colors. So they might choose red and yellow and end up mixing orange, yellow, orange, red, orange. They can add white to make pinks and peaches. Then they have to arrange their pieces back together in 3 different ways to find the strongest composition. In this case, I glue a bunch of student sculptures together, smaller relief sculptures, to make one giant one, because we were having a show at a local gallery and it was just going to be our work, and we needed to fill big wall spaces and wanted a few wow factors. This year, I was trying to figure out how to create form. I couldn't mail clay to my students. I could mail them paper, and they could take this 2-dimensional paper and make 3-dimensional forms, such as these paper roses, by cutting, curling, coning these layers of paper. And then when we lined them up on the table, we could go from red to green. That's half the color wheel, by arranging them red, pinks, purples, blues, teals, and greens. And so we ended up decorating a tree at the local Museum of Art and Science for their Festival of Trees. And we printed out 6 pages of Helen Keller quotes, which were inspiring, and we called it Helen Keller's Garden. Talked about how diversity makes things more beautiful. And when you talk about diversity in the community, don't forget people with visual impairments, because everyone deserves a chance to bloom in the garden of humanity. And you can use that. I know it's a little corny, but I wrote it myself. This was our 2nd year. That came down last month. The tree we did last year was also kind of a way for my students to learn to advocate for themselves and to teach the community about who they are as a body, as the student body. So we used a lot of Braille paper. We used strips to fold Moravian stars. We curled it and put it into glass balls. We used strips to quill onto plastic red Braille book cover. We sawed, cut down dowels and painted them, made little white canes, and called it our vision of Christmas. We even had little eyeball stress balls that we tucked in there, and kind of helped the community see who we are and what we're about here. Texture is so important. When pressing leaves or berries into clay, bottoms of shoes, anything you can find that has texture, you can press into clay, or let the slab of clay harden to leather hard, and then carve into it and create texture that way. I have a student here with a piece of cardboard that she used a caulk gun to do her drawing of sun and clouds and butterflies and flowers. Then she knows where to paint. I think anytime I use hot glue for students, they use wiki sticks a lot of times. And if you don't know what a wiki stick is, it's a string that's dipped in wax. I'm assuming it's a candle wick because they call it wiki sticks. And it works great to kind of lay out a picture, but when it's cold, sometimes it falls off or it sticks to our portfolio cover. So I like to go around it with hot glue, and then they can take them off and know where to draw or paint. When I covered balance, visual balance is hard for a lot of people to understand, even with vision. So we start really basic with a scale and balancing things in the room. Is this asymmetrical balance if you have 3 little rolls of tape and 1 big roll of tape, or is it symmetrical? How can we make it symmetrical? I use shaving cream, and so that they can draw on either side of a tape line, a line of symmetry, or a magnetic board with a tape line where they can arrange the magnets in a way that's balanced symmetrically or asymmetrically. And I have photographs that I print out for them and cut their face in half so that they can replicate the other half as a mirror image. For those who can't see, I will trace all of their facial features in hot glue, and then they use wiki sticks to try to measure how far over this eyebrow is and what's the shape of the eye, and then they can color it in from there. We also did sand mandalas for studying Buddhist monks and radial balance. We did screen prints of Andy Warhol for crystallographic, and we tried to make that tactile. We made mobiles studying Calder, and that was something that was also very 3-dimensional. Instead of talking about pattern this year and just beating the elements and principles to death, I decided to do a textile unit a few months ago. I've never done that before, but it gave us a way to study cultures of the world, because batik is from Indonesia, tapa cloth is from Tonga. They use a lot of applique in Benin, and kente cloth from Ghana. And so instead of wax stop out for the batik, we used Elmer's glue, because then they could feel where to paint their liquid watercolor or their fabric dye. And then they could decide if they wanted to rinse the glue out to expose the white fabric that they had protected, or if they want to leave it on so that they can continue to feel it later. With applique, I have all sorts of upholstery fabric, pleather, felt, so that it's really a textural rich experience, and they can cut out shapes and tell stories. We have a famous quilter from Georgia, Harriet Powers, who was a slave herself. She was a freed slave, and some of her quilts have been in, she has 2 quilts really, one in the Smithsonian, one in the Boston Museum of Art. But the fact that she comes from Georgia and my students live where she lived makes it very personal. And then you can talk about how this, we don't know, maybe she found out through her maternal line how to do this process of applique, because it comes from West Africa, and that's where many of the slaves come from. So we're trying to talk about passing on traditions and knowledge. Tapa cloth comes from Tonga, and they pound out the inner bark of mulberry trees and then make rubbings on these wooden tables that are carved out for the pattern. So my students used plastic shapes or matte shapes that they arranged and then did crayon rubbings. Then they would paint it with black acrylic or black marker. I did black puffy paint for this student whose hands you see, because he couldn't see his own shapes and he wants everything to be tactile. For kente cloth, we did paper weavings. Anyone can do that. That has pattern involved. And then they were to use black marker to make symbols, zigzags, X's, circles, triangles. This is a really good way to talk about symbols in art, symbols with shapes, symbols with colors, because kente cloth has a lot of that. For those who couldn't see, they could use stencils, and then I could trace their shapes with puffy paint. We did weaving with yarn. We did loom weaving with the stretchy loops of knit fabric that they could make hot pads out of. And this student in the center is using his, I think that's a Visio book. We have some reveal. We have a lot of closed circuit TV magnifiers, which I love to use in my classroom. Art history is always fun for me to incorporate. We had studied Cindy Sherman, who was a photographer, who still is a photographer. In the 70s, she did a lot of self-portraits showing women in film as stereotype. And so we talked about what stereotypes people might have of them, being a teenager, being blind, you know, just being a girl, being, I don't know, they talked a lot. I was really impressed with the conversations that happened around that. And then they had to take their own self-portrait with that stereotype. So I have a student here who has a fabric wrapped around his face, around his mouth and his eyes, because he's confused why people at restaurants will always ask his parents what he wants to drink. Instead of asking him, they say, why don't you ask him? Oh, we didn't know he could talk, you know? And so he was showing this, exposing the stereotype. Other students took an opposite approach. People don't think I know how to cook because they can't see. So they would hold a spatula and a frying pan and wear an apron and take a picture that way. I love to use cultures, as you already learned just from my textile unit. So masks are a good way to incorporate shape. Students can cut their own out of cardboard and arrange it different ways. For younger kids, I might have a whole table and say, go shopping for eye shapes. I'll have like 50 nose shapes. They can mix and match and put an eye shape as a mouth. And then they paint that and arrange it. Some of them are just fun. They just turn out kind of whimsical, and they're still making their own choices as much as possible. Description for these cultures and the clothing that they wear is really difficult. I don't think you can appreciate what a toga is without wearing one. So I brought sheets in because we studied ancient Greece last month. I have shirts from Africa and wooden African masks. My sister is a professor of art history. She's an Africanist, so she's lived in Africa a bunch of times. My brother did his dissertation in Nigeria. And then my parents lived in Tonga for a couple years. So I have all these artifacts. I lived in Japan, so I have kimonos. And so when they try it on, it makes more sense than when I say kimono has a long sleeve. Well, does it go past their fingertips? Well, no, it's just hard to describe until they wear it and see that I'm talking about the length of the sleeve from their wrist down to the ground and all the layers with the OB. It just brings it to life a little bit more. When we studied Mexico, I would play mariachi music and I would have them experiment. So if you make your own maraca, how does it sound different if you use 1 cup or 2 cups, vertical, horizontal, dried rice, dried beans, macaroni? What's going to make a different sound, the loudest sound? What if you combine these materials? And then we play along with the mariachi music, or we'll listen to music and they'll interpret it with whatever medium they choose, and it will show up in the energy and the beats and the colors they choose. The cup and ball game, we just use popsicle sticks with a little Dixie cup taped to the end, and then there's a string and a wooden bead that they try to swing and get the bead into the cup. But I like to use a jingle bell because it's just one more layer of sound that will help them. I had a student with autism who was obsessed with this toy. We made tissue paper flowers, cut tissue paper, sombreros out of styrofoam cups and plates, paper mache pinatas. This is why I'm a teacher, because of the moments that you don't expect. I don't talk down to my students who are nonverbal. I still try to teach them the history of the pinata, even though it's not relevant to their life. But I also try to connect with them at their level. And so as I was blowing out the balloon to make these pinatas, I said, what sound do you think it will make if I let the air out? And one student said, shh. And she had never made a sound with her mouth before. The teachers and the parapro in the room had never heard her in the years that they taught her. The speech therapist had never had her make a sound out of her mouth. We let it go. You're right. What sound do you think it'll make this time? Shh. She did it every time. She did it next week. We were crying, we were laughing. It's why I do my job, because you can teach anything through art, and art can be about anything. These experiences are so worthwhile. With Totem Poles, it helps to explore Native Americans in the Northwest and their symbolism. I ask my student to know each animal and the symbol that it represents as they make their 13-inch clay totems. and then pick one that represents them to do for a collaborate paper mache totem pole. We have a couple that are about 7 or 8 feet tall that they can make and paint. Last year we made a totem pole that it had nothing to do, we didn't really study Native Americans. We were just talking about the process of slab and slip and score. And they voted about what they wanted their garden totem pole to be and chose Georgia, the state of Georgia. So we did the state bird, the state flower, reptile, tree, and everybody picked one that they would add to it. And it ended up being our calendar cover for this year's school year. So I just want to give you a few tips about just general accessibility that you can do with some of your students. Of course, hands-on is key when you connect it to other disciplines. We want to use objects from those disciplines. We studied insects this year. National Geographic had charts with insects that are disappearing and why they are. We watched videos about it, but oh. That's our bell. It's February, so we're doing love songs. Okay, sorry about that interruption. So we have plastic models of insects, and that way the students can touch to show me, where's the thorax, where are the antennae, where are the wings, how's the ladybug different from a praying mantis, and then they could invent their own insect using whatever we had in the room and kind of describe the parts of their bug. And did they kind of mix an insect with an arachnid because it has 8 legs? And it was kind of fun to see what they came up with. We did the same with taxidermy animals, paper mache, mixing textures. Here's a mouse that has feathers on it instead of fur. So playing with color and just kind of hybrid animals. I have a color wheel here that uses stippling because we were studying Syrah and pointillism. And so we have scented markers here. They know that blueberry is blue and lemon or banana is yellow. But if it was somebody who really needed it to be tactile, then you could make your pie square in your color wheel. That's that 1/6 of a portion of that pie chart. You could add beans for blue and rice for yellow, and then beans and rice would be the green. I did Japanese woodcuts as one of our units. And so I have these old posters that I covered in hot glue so they could feel where the bridge was, where the trees were, where the snow is falling. I have like all of the freedom quilts with the Underground Railroad in foam so that they can feel the shapes, and we can use that as an assessment and a reference. Parts of a vase or ancient Greek pottery shapes I can do in puffy paint, and then they can point to the neck, the shoulders, the arms, the body. They can pick which kind they want to make. A hot glue rose that I have here, a student with no vision did use purple watercolor paint to fill it in, and the lines still show through. And then we have screen printing, Campbell's soup image that the student is adding flocking, fuzzy little stuff that they can shake off their print later and it will stick to the ink so they can feel the fuzziness, or powdered plastic that you can use a hot glue gun to have raised lines. I have a coloring book that is just that, it's tactile because it was screen printed by hand and using that process. You can use aluminum foil over yarn on cardboard or emboss foil so that students can color the lines and do drawings that they can feel. Again, wiki sticks for vertical lines, gluing buttons and macaroni, twisting wire into shapes of faces with glass beads for eyes, and you know, pipe cleaners for hair or mouths is all ways to make it come to life for the student. Using magnifiers is another good tip. So I have one student's using just a glass magnifier that I have in class. He also used an iPad to take a picture of his flower, his plant that he has on the table in front of him so that he can zoom in. And I already talked about the closed circuits. I like to really make things big enough that they don't need a magnifier. We have these 8-foot panels that we use for the sets, spring programs or for backdrops for prom. So we'll paint 8 of these 8-foot paintings a year. And I'll project it. A student will trace the chalk drawing. I'll go over it so they can see it again. If the line's thick enough, then they can paint independently. I have a picture of Michael Jackson for our Motown concert, New York City prom theme that we had, painting over like the Leaning Tower of Pisa and the Eiffel Tower. Tape can be used as a stop out or a stencil, or cut paper. There's a kid who was really interested in graffiti art and wanted to use spray paint. So we found a wall. The science teacher didn't care if we did a solar system, and we cut out circles, and he and I spray painted the planets on this wall. Wiki sticks. There's one of my favorite students in my art class did a bunch of portraits, kind of faces. And then I would cut out the shape in construction paper and tape it down so that he could paint the background without disrupting what was on top, instead of painting the background first and kind of protect that face. This girl is using wood to make a cane rack, and she used tape to separate the colors. And we're doing soccer balls and basketballs, and the student who's totally blind is using wiki sticks to create his barriers. Don't forget about value contrast. You can use dark paper with light colors, or you can use light paper with dark colors. As long as it's making it pop, then a lot of low vision students should be fine with that. And then kind of making things come to life by using all the senses. When I teach architecture, I like to use graham cracker houses and candy. They remember it. My daughter remembers eating a roll with honey on it 10 years ago in her Sunday school class. I take them to the greenhouse on campus so they can smell it, they can feel the heat. We walk around and collect leaves. They have to learn the name of the tree. When we do our leaf collages, it's about size, shape, color of the leaf itself. We know that information. We can touch the bark of the tree and name it. We did a not Pinewood Derby, we're not Cub Scouts, soapbox derby car that I stenciled out. I taped it out, the students spray painted it. We won best in show. It's got little Braille on the side of it, Georgia Academy for the Blind. And to be able to feel alive by going down a hill at a very fast pace, fast speed with something that you made is pretty fun. So just to review quick again, we want to make as many real world experiences as possible. I take them out to gallery shows every chance I get. We have workshops at local colleges. There are 3 colleges we have good connections with, and just outside. Tactile images are important, making things big or magnifying them to look big using stencils. And high contrast are all ways that we can make art accessible for our students. I have all of my lessons, most all of my lessons on kristenapplebee.blogspot.com. I probably 45 a year. So if you need ideas, you can just scroll through and look for something that might work in your classroom. And that's all and then Insights is the highlight. When my students get to sit down to a $55 meal and get to shake hands with the president of APH, it just is a highlight of their life up to that point. So I really try to encourage my students, and I'll say, this might be good enough for me to send off. I don't know, maybe you could try it again. And it's something that they'll remember their entire life. So it's been a great experience for us to participate in that.
I love all of these ideas, Kristen. I knew what was coming from being behind the scenes and getting to talk with you and work with you along the process, but I had no idea of how amazingly wonderful this was truly going to come out to be, and how many connections that you made for different things in people's minds. And then even what's coming with Tristan and Rob speaking in a moment. I smiled so much. It was a feel good for me. And your ideas, I just think are brilliant. Lots of great comments that are coming through. And I will say, just reiterate one thing that you said that I had to write to transition over, and we're going to listen for a moment and hear about what some of the things are that we have through the American Printing House for the Blind that can also help you with your fine arts instruction. So I will let you take it away for a few minutes there, Tristan.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great, great. Okay, so thank you, Amy. We don't have a lot of time, so I will just show you 3 APH art products and then provide you with a more extended list with hyperlinks that you can access after this presentation. So first is the Paint by Number Safari series, which consists of 5 books, 4 of which are available now, and the 5th, shown there in the orange, is in development right now. So peers and siblings with and without sight enjoy this print tactile coloring series. APH developed this series in collaboration with Playability Toys. And the fun facts that accompany each of the 10 drawings in each book partners well with core curriculum subjects such as math, geography, and animal science. And the drawings, they work well with crayons, watercolor paints, and markers. So I'm quickly going to show you some of the our latest book, which is Desert Creatures. And let's see, I've got to figure out now, Amy, how to get back over to my document camera. Okay,
No
share my
worries.
screen. Share.
We see you sharing.
Okay, is it full screen for you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great, great, great. Okay, so first of all, we see here our desert creatures, our little front cover model is the Fennec Fox. So I'm just going to show you quickly. This is the opening page with our introduction that tells you that in the drawings, the wide raised embossed lines identify the animal's body. And then the thin embossed lines depict the color separation within the animal's body. And then the dashed lines identify background images and various things within the environment. And each each of the drawings come with a fun facts, and the fun facts help teach color concepts with an emphasis on real world colors. And that is really the key to this product and why we developed it. I always say that, art is endless. You can do anything with art. It is so creative. You just saw what Kristen showed you. You don't have to paint things the way we know how we see them. It's limitless. But we did feel it was important for someone with visual impairment, total blindness, that they did understand what the real world colors were out there in their environment. So that's mainly our key for taking this project on. And it also encourages visual and tactile exploration, shape recognition, and helps develop fine motor skills. And it teaches you great things about amazing creatures. So here quickly, it shows our color code we have. We teach you how you can bill into new colors together and how you can lighten colors and darken colors. So then I'm just quickly going to show you a few of these. Okay. Okay, this is our tarantula hawk wasp, and I am going to use it because students can learn about life sciences such as life processes, relationships to each other, and their environments by using this product. And I'm quickly going to read you an excerpt from the tarantula hawk wasp. And it's in the fun facts, but you may not think it's that fun, but we'll see, okay? After the wasp hunts down a tarantula, it administers a sting, which paralyzes the spider, then drags the tarantula, still alive, to its burrow and lays its eggs on the spider. When the eggs hatch, the larvae feed on the spider's fluids through a hole they make in the spider's abdomen while it is still alive. A very painful death for the tarantula. Well, wasn't that a lot of fun to learn about? So now we've got a Gila monster here, but we're not going to go through all of them right now. Here I'm going to show you the Fennec Fox, which is our cover model. And here students can learn about weights and measures by using Paint by Number Safari. And this is good because the United States is one of the few countries globally that uses the imperial system of measurement. So here we learn that the Fennec fox is the teeniest fox in the world, weighing an average of only 2 to 3 pounds, which is the same as 0.9 to 1.4 kilograms. So interesting little facts there. And then I'll switch back to our last little fun fact I'm going to share with you. This is the king penguin. Students learn world geography by reading the various landscapes described in the fun facts. Here we see the king penguin is one of 4 species that live in the Antarctic desert, which is the largest desert in the world. It receives less than 51 millimeters of participation inland per year. That's about 2 inches. And, you know, I bet a lot of people don't even recognize that ice-covered land is really a desert. So after we get through all of the printed fun facts, you'll see here, I'll try to see if I can't hold this up. It really depends. Oh, it's not doing too good. The sun has gone in out my window and it's not giving me good light right now. So I will try another page and see if we're doing any better with it. No, I'm afraid I have lost my light. I am sorry. Can you see at all where this dotted line comes straight down?
We can see the dotted,
You
the
can?
embossed dotted
Yeah.
line that you just pointed to for
Okay.
us site dependent.
Yeah,
Site
that
dependent.
line there that separates your fun fact from your color code for the students getting ready to paint. Okay. So I'm just going to flip to the back so we can highlight these animals for you to see. Okay, I've got here the Arabian camel, which let me tell you that. You know how the Fennec Fox was the teeniest? Well, on the opposite side of the scale, the Arabian camel, it can weigh up to 1,320 to 2,020 pounds, which is 559 to 998 kilograms. So that's put that little bitty fox next to that Arabian camel, man. We have a Gila monster. And here's that lovely tarantula hawk wasp, which is actually very pretty because it's purple. Here we have the Verdun bird. Here we have a roadrunner, and I really, really love that drawing of the roadrunner. I think that's great. Here's our king penguin, the desert tortoise, the desert bighorn sheep, the desert lion, which is different from the lion you may find in the jungle. And then here again is our cover model, the Fennec Fox. Okay, so that, and they all then fit back in the little folder envelope in back. There we go. So next, Amy, if we can go, I will stop sharing and we can go back to that PowerPoint. Okay, so our next slide is the Aph Braille Beads. And they not only make for a fun craft activity, but they provide endless opportunities for self-expression through designing one's own jewelry and accessories. So here, as shown in the photos, we have a key ring and we also have a cane fob and then a very enlarged braille bead so you could actually see what they look like up close. But I tell people to consider taking orders for objects such as this keychain and cane fob, and for your next fundraising event, sell them. Who knows? One could possibly make this a cottage industry selling items on Etsy. And so now our next product I'm going to show you. APH does not have an art product manager. So really any project manager can shepherd an art product through development. Like Amy told you, I'm the multiple disabilities and physical education product manager, but I have developed a lot of art products because I actually came from an art background originally. So I thoroughly enjoy working on Paint by Number Safari and doing the Braille Beads. But I wanted to show a textured based product in this presentation. So I reached out to APH's 2 product managers who focus on tactile learning, and that's Karen Pope and Fred Otto, and I wanted their recommendation. So here is one of APH's carousel of texture sets, and these colorful sheets of textured they partner well with the other textured paper collection listed on the product resource slide that I'm going to show you in just a second. And these sheets provide numerous tactile possibilities for use in mixed media art, which is really one of my favorite art styles. And one can also make greeting cards, holiday decorations, and even more jewelry. You know, no one can ever have too much jewelry, right? So APH has actually had submissions for the APH Insight Art Competition using Carousel of Textures. So our next, I'm just showing you here that we don't have time to go over all of these, but these slides provide an exposure to APH art related products, and I have provided all their links to the APH website. So that is available in your handout. And APH will be hosting a future webinar on many of these products, highlighting their attributes and showing you how to use them. And then quickly at the end here, I want to add that APH has a tremendous amount of art available on the Tactile Graphics image library, and you can alter the art to meet the needs of your students. And I don't think I have ever done a webinar, regardless of the topic, you know, even physical education, without somehow mentioning the Tactile Graphics image library. Check it out, and remember, it is absolutely free. And with that, I will turn it over to Amy and Rob. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tristan. Before going on to that tactile graphics image library, just want to reiterate that this is an exposure. And so some of the titles that are on the slide that are in the handout, just so that you're aware, Time for Art. It's a booklet I look at it as of a how-to and an idea booklet. The Lots of Dots series, the Paint Pot palette, which is a great tool to use when painting and things of that sort. Again, you mentioned about some textured papers, Tristan, but there's also the textured paper collection, the quick draw paper, which so many of us know about, that when you apply a wet type of marker or paint, the paper actually puffs up. The feel and peel stickers. I have seen so many amazing art projects from students that use collage and things of that sort of using the feel and peel stickers. The color by texture marking mats, even the circus coloring pages. There's so much that we can do with our Draftsman tool and our Tactile Doodle, and even the Tactile Graphic Line Slate. Again, I wish we had time to go over these right now, but stay tuned because we will dive in deep with our project managers on these that will help inspire you to even more ideas. But as mentioned, the Tactile Graphic Image Library, what I wanted to give a quick shout out is that coming this spring, you can save the date in your minds, on your calendars. Museums, Touch the Arts, and the Tactile Graphic Image Library are collaborating together to bring fine art to everyone. And I think this is fascinating. The role of Touch the Arts will be working with the guidance from museum staff to present the art in a readable format that will then be added to APH's Tactile Graphic Image Library. So it hasn't happened yet, but the planning is underway. After this project, the tactile graphics will then be available for on-site museum tours and available for download from our Tactile Graphics Image Library. And I'll ask if Leanne could kindly just drop that TGIL link into the chat box. So by being in our image library, everyone, no matter where they are, can experience these for free. Can't underestimate that, and just for free. The Touch the Art staff is currently working with the Vatican Museum Education Department, which is amazing to me. The Vatican Museum has provided access to artwork such as oil on canvas by deposition by Caravaggio, along with other descriptive guides and supplemental teaching ideas that help enhance the experience. So the Tactile Graphic Image Library will send out an announcement on this fine art category very soon once it becomes available. And I love passing things off to you, Rob, with talking about our Insights Art Contest. Kristen began to share a little bit about it, of how she's had students featured, and we would love to hear you share more.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. And we are so thrilled that you were able to join us. My name is Rob Gill, and I am the Special Programs Coordinator. And I'm in charge of a really wonderful program called Insights Art. And many of you know about this. This is a contest for artists of all ages, all over the world, who happen to be blind. We are accepting entries for the 2021 season through March 26th. So at the end of next month, we are going to be accepting art. And I know all of you, just like me, were absolutely inspired by all the things that Kristen and Tristan have shown. And I am thrilled to be able to invite you all to participate and to have all your students participate. You can this year turn in a digital photograph of the artwork along with a completed entry form, and you can get that entry form from the website that is listed on the screen. And one of the things that we're doing just to help you out, I know it's a really difficult time of year, is to be able to take a digital photo of something even like a piece of sculpture so that you don't have to ship the artwork to us to be judged. Hold on to that artwork though, because if your piece is selected, we're going to ask you to ship it out at that time. But we really want to be able to make sure that everybody is able to participate as much as they can. I know it's very difficult these days, but there are some wonderful ideas that Kristen has shown. And there's also a number of really wonderful resources online that'll show you how to make certain things like clay, homemade clay, or paper mache, or accessible materials so that your student can actually make a little bit of art at home. I want to just encourage you basically to participate. For those of you who are interested, we also have the APH Insights Art Calendar. It's on sale, and it's a really wonderful calendar this year, and we're thrilled to have it. I'm going to show just a few images from it. These are some of the artworks that are appearing in this year's calendar. So feel free to order those from the APH website as well. There's some really wonderful artists who have contributed to the program over the years, and we are thrilled to be able to put them in our annual calendar. So please enter the contest, have your students enter the contest, have your children in your lives enter the contest, and we would absolutely love to have their entries. So on that note, I'm going to toss it back to Amy. Thank you, Amy, for the opportunity to talk about the Insights Art Program.
It was great hearing all about what you had to share with everyone. What I heard too, along with Kristen's great quote, "You can teach anything through art," is in hearing Kristen, you speak, and then Tristan, you sharing some product, I loved hearing about how we can infuse the core curriculum within visual arts and make anything a history lesson or a science lesson. There is so much that we can be learning through that. So I just want to say thank you. And also, if I'm not mistaken, Kristen, I think when you had an opportunity to present, maybe even some of your students from the Georgia Academy for the Blind has made it into that calendar, made it into an APH calendar that comes out every year, perhaps. So I hope that you all did have some sort of creativity that was sparked in your mind today, and that we reached that goal, and that you will stay tuned for us to be able to dive even deeper into some of the products that can help capture that accessibility component for our students that we so much want, especially for the visual arts. So we just want to say thank you again for being with us and listening in and being inspired along with us.